Just days after suspected Paris terrorist Salah Abdeslam was captured in Belgium Friday, a new series of terror attacks in Belgium have left, at last count, around 30 dead, dozens and dozens more injured, and ISIS has indeed taken responsibility for this attack. There was one explosion at a Belgian train station, where, according to a Metro spokesperson, around 15 were killed and 55 injured, 10 very seriously. And then there were two explosions in the departure area of the Brussels, Belgium airport, where now the death toll continues to climb, close to 100 people injured there. One of the blasts at the airport is believed to have been a suicide bombing. Pictures have been released, and a lot of this stuff is still pretty early, of individuals suspected of being the bombers. We still aren't even sure, Lewis, and by the time you hear this, it may have changed, whether some or all of the alleged or suspected perpetrators here were killed. As I mentioned, at least one of these incidents reported as being a suicide bombing. Belgium has raised its terror alert to the highest level. Trains have been diverted. Planes have been diverted. People ordered to stay where they are. European security officials bracing for a major attack for weeks, and they warned that the Islamic State was preparing to strike. Now they have indeed taken responsibility. Here's just a little bit of the audio and video of the utter chaos at the airport just after these two explosions.
What it was? A job or was it a terrorist? It's okay. It's okay.
This is any airport, right, Lewis? I mean, it happened to be Brussels, but this is not a special airport where no one would ever find themselves. This is like Paris, or this is like London. This is like Boston or JFK. This is just an airport. And as we know, it's security agencies are less than completely open about what security exists before you pass through TSA screening at airports. And we've talked about how at Tel Aviv airport in Israel, the screening starts miles out from the airport. On the service road into the airport, when I was going back to fly out, we were stopped. And members of the Israeli military do sort of an initial screening there. And then they can ask you to open up your trunk or whatever. And then there is also screening when you're just even entering the terminal. And there are sort of these layers. And this has been something that's discussed for a while, Lewis. And we've been trying to have a sort of sober discussion about it without fear-mongering. But the reality is most train stations are not particularly protected, although you hear anecdotally, oh, there's screenings for explosives built into the door frames. So you couldn't just get in with anything. Well, is that true? Is that something that's said? We don't really know.
Doesn't mean you can't throw something on the tracks.
Doesn't mean you can't throw something on the tracks. And then also, when it comes to airports, the area before you go through TSA screening, seemingly relatively unsecured, although we do hear anecdotally that no, it is more secure than you imagine, and quite literally just absolute terror.
Certainly could be any airport, anywhere. I feel a little bit safer knowing that there's an ocean separating us from the countries where many of these terrorists receive their training and are
funded.
Yeah, but you look at Turkey, Paris, Belgium. It's a dangerous world.
And we are already getting, and we're going to have a very, very broad and but also in-depth report on this issue of the sort of dynamic that's created around, do we call it Islamic terror or do we not? To what extent is the Quran actually specifically responsible for individual acts? How much of it can be blamed on U.S. foreign policy in creating an environment in which Islam... This conversation, we're working on a really in-depth piece right now that we're going to delve into it. But needless to say, those conversations and the controversies and discussions that always start when there is such an incident, and again, ISIS has taken responsibility here, those are going to happen, and those are going to be conversations that in many cases are not productive because of the sort of visceral, emotional reactions people have to them on both sides.
That's right. They are conversations that we need to have.
Absolutely.
And let's not leave anything out for fear of being politically correct or being labeled an Islamophobe.